also met a couple of other girls that were from the Taylorsville area. Obviously, I think Frank and I were the only two from Bethlehem. There were a couple of people from the Ellendale district and a couple from the Whitburg area, but a lot of the group was from in and around the little town of Taylorsville, and we had an opportunity to meet them. When I arrived at school in the fall of 1947, found my homeroom and sat down in my seat and looked over, I saw two girls that had been at 4-H camp, and they immediately recognized me, and we had a little reunion there. It was nice to have some people that we knew when we arrived at a new school. I can't imagine going through what some military kids go through, changing schools every couple of years and that sort of thing, and other children whose parents transfer frequently. The school group is a pretty sensitive group for most of us, and it would be nice to have some friends in the group. Speaking of starting back to school, I had begun taking on more responsibilities at home. In fact, the milking routine in the morning, I did a part of it, but I didn't have to be there to clean up and all those things, so I could help out with the milking and then have time to brush up a little bit before I boarded the school bus and headed for school. But in the evening, I had pretty much taken on the entire responsibility for milking all of the cows and then cleaning up the milk barn and the utensils and all of the electric milk machine and all those things. So I really didn't have much time to do homework, but it was never my style to do a lot of homework anyway. But I wound up in an English class with a teacher just out of college. And for some reason or other, she kind of insisted that if you were going to learn English, you really had to write some reports along the line. And I kind of resisted that philosophy until the end of the first 6 weeks period when I saw my report card with an F in English. I got the message pretty quickly, and actually I was pretty good at writing reports. I could do them quickly. And from that point on, I did in her class. I pulled my grade back up where it should have been and had a good year, but she taught me a little bit of lesson in the first 6 weeks of English class there. One of the things that I really enjoyed in high school, and I don't know if enough people have this experience, but the BOAG program that I was involved in was very interesting, particularly since I had lived on a farm all my life and knew a lot of the background behind it and the folk sayings about that turned into facts when you really had an education in agriculture. And I also liked Mr. Osborne, who was the ag teacher. He had like most ag teachers, had graduated from NC State. And not I don't think in the freshman year I had an opportunity to go to NC State, but in later years, because I was involved with seed judging and tool identification and dairy judging and a lot of extracurricular things in the ag program, I had an opportunity to go with a group of 3 or 4 guys and Mr. Osborne, and he would take us to the YMCA at the corner of the campus at NC State and make sure we had a room. And then he would go off and visit with some of his buddies and come back later and join us at the basketball arena. Those days were the times when NC State, under coach, and I'll have to look up his name, had built a program that had never really been seen in North Carolina or in the Southeast. Several of them were military veterans because that was shortly after World War II, obviously, and people that had skipped college to go to war had now come back, and some of them were a little bit more mature and playing college basketball. I remember two guys that were at state by the name of Dick Dickey and Sam Ranzino. And the first time I ever saw a college basketball game, I was just totally amazed. I had watched high school basketball where the people played on a clay court outdoors, and it wasn't very safe for one thing, because you went down on a clay court, you were going to get a few scratches and maybe something broken. If you went down on a good quality basketball court in an arena, there probably wasn't too much danger of you being severely injured, although obviously you can get some skin burns and that sort of thing. But I remember we went to a game that NC State was playing, and I don't really remember who they were playing. I was not a really avid fan. I didn't follow them except when I had an opportunity to go to the arena on State's campus. By the way, that was shortly after Reynolds Arena was built, within a couple of years after Reynolds Arena was built. And the coach had come from Indiana, as I recall. I'll look that up. They were very, very interesting to watch. And Mr. Overn would come in, and he had apparently had a few toddies between our departure at the Y and his arrival at the arena, because he'd be talking fast, and he was really enjoying the ball game too. So it was a good way to get to know him on a different basis than teacher versus pupil. One part of the ag program that I particularly liked, and my friend Ted Crouch excelled at, was the shop that they had as a part of the ag department, with all the woodworking equipment, welding, and most everything that later on a person that was in the trades would be doing. And that was the first opportunity I'd ever had to really work with good equipment, power equipment. We had an old dual handsaw at home, but it didn't do a good job. But I mentioned my friend Ted. He excelled at building things. I remember back in the 5th grade, I mentioned the fact that he built ball airplanes all the time. When we got in high school, he built pieces of furniture. He just had a great imagination and an ability to turn his imagination into something useful. He and I later, and particularly when we were juniors and seniors, we were pretty much in charge of building sets on the stage for any play that was going on. And Ted was always in charge. I was a pretty good helper, but he was in charge of how we were going to do it. And both of us were actually members of the drama club because they needed our hammers, not our acting ability. but I did perform in a couple of plays. One was the Ellerby Hillbillies, I think. There was a takeoff on the hillbilly thing that was on television. And the Beta Club actually did the play as a fundraiser. We did it in Taylorsville, and then we went to Bethlehem and did it, and I think we went to another school, as I recall, and did it. And we were doing that in order to raise enough money to pay our way to the Beta Club convention, and that was in our senior year of high school, I believe. But anyway, working with Ted in the shop was always a pleasure, and particularly when it got us out of study hall or out of some class activity that we really didn't care much about. The teachers had an interest in the project getting done, so they always made sure that we had time to spend up on the stage figuring out how to make the stage look like a house or whatever it needed to look like. A senior play that we had when I was a senior in high school, and I did participate in this one in a very small role, was a play named Tish, Tish. I'd never heard of it before, and I haven't heard of it since, so I don't think it ever made it on Broadway, although it might have, I don't know. But that was a great part of the high school experience.